across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to the home of Common Sense Talk. It is Mark Dolan with you for one night only, and a jam-packed show we have for you. O'Sullivan is still on holiday, but I've taken the helm for 3 hours, and we've got a lot to get through. So, as Britain teeters on the brink of bankruptcy, could economic collapse spark a snap general election? I'll be asking Britain's most trusted and respected economist, the formidable Liam Halligan, live on the show. Is the ITV star Rylan Clark, the man with the white teeth? Do you know Rylan Clark? He's a star on ITV. Is he a bigot for saying that we should stop the boats? As the popular presenter faces calls from the woke mob to be fired, is his bold intervention proof that securing our borders has now finally entered the political mainstream? Are his remarks a victory for people power? Another free speech row as Father Ted writer Graham Linehan is arrested at Heathrow Airport by 5 police officers and treated, quite frankly, like a terrorist. In fact, he wasn't treated like a terrorist because when people do terror acts in airports, they normally walk free. Anyhow, treated like a common criminal for remarks about trans people. Piers Morgan and J.K. Rowling have condemned the police's actions. I'll get reaction from Britain's free speech czar, Lord Toby Young, coming up later. As the Home Secretary's one-in, one-out policy with France lies in tatters, and with a controversial new plan to welcome Gazans into Britain, should Keir Starmer sack Yvette Cooper in order to save his premiership? Is that enough? What does Keir Starmer need to do? I know that most of you are disgruntled. In fact, most of you have given up completely on this Labour government. But is there anything that Starmer could do to win back, or even win for the first time, your support? Here's a simple question. This is an exclusive question for my viewers and listeners today. If he changes tack, if he shifts right, could Keir Starmer out Farage Nigel Farage? And the Royal Peace Summit is on, but as King Charles and Prince Harry reportedly prepare to meet this September, one member of the family is not happy, Prince William, who is said to be furious at the idea of bringing Harry back into the royal fold. Do we forgive the prodigal prince? Let me know your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. I'll bring you more on this bitter civil war, which is currently dividing the royal family. Now listen, a few of you may well have fixed yourselves a cocktail at this show. Mark Dolan in for Kevin O'Sullivan. I've got no doubt that Kevin O'Sullivan is enjoying a cocktail as we speak, or 3, and rightly so. He's a man of appetite, Kevin O'Sullivan. And you might be enjoying a cocktail too. Maybe you're having a cold beer. Well, can I tell you about Gen Z? Samara, who on earth are Gen Z? How old are they? It's young people, isn't it? People in their 20s, Gen Z. Do you know what they're doing to lager now? Have you heard this? They're putting ice in it. Is nothing sacred? They're putting... I blame the Irish, by the way. I'm an Irishman myself. Magnus started it with the cider, and now 20-year-olds are putting ice in beer. I'll be speaking to a brilliant comedian that's written a show about booze, and he's not happy. What would Keir Starmer have to do to win back any support on your part? Is it over for him already? Is his premiership a busted flush? Would you like to see a different Labour Prime Minister? Would that help? What have Labour got to do? Should they get rid of Starmer? Or could he shift right with some common sense policies and out Farage? 0344 499 1000. You can text us at 87222. Tweet us at talkTV. But be careful what you tweet, because if it's a hurty tweet, you'll go to prison, because this is 1984 Orwellian Britain. What a shambles. Well done to the team for putting together a very strong show tonight. I cannot wait to get my teeth into this conversation. What's racist today? Knitting? Is that racist? Is that an example of white supremacy? Flower arranging, maybe that's racist. Mathematics, turning up for work on time, is that racist? Brushing your hair in the morning. Flossing, is that racist? What's racist? Putting milk in your tea with a bag still in the cup, is that racist? Well, I'll tell you what's racist, folks. The countryside. Welcome to bonkers clown world Britain in 2025. There's been a crazy woke report from the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies. Can you believe that there is a Centre for Hate Studies? Now, that is a red flag in itself. I've already, when I become Prime Minister, it's just a matter of time, we can but dream, I've already defunded the Centre for Hate Studies. When I'm Prime Minister, the Centre for Hate Studies is gone. And do you know why? Well, because in the old days, hate did used to mean something. And it's when you're obnoxious and violent towards somebody and you maybe threaten their safety. Hateful language. I don't like that type of person. Let's go and kill them. OK, that's the old-fashioned definition of hate, and we don't like it. It's a bad thing. It's a very un-Christian thing, hatred. It's a very inhuman thing. It's wrong. Hatred is wrong. But the problem is, like so many words now, hatred, misinformation, racism, everything's racist. Right? When you overuse those words, well, then they lose their meaning altogether. And now hate means nothing. I'll tell you what hate means now. Hate is a red flag. Right? The University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies, that is a red flag because the word hate has in fact been leveraged against anyone that challenges the elite, left-wing, progressive, woke consensus. That's what hate is now. Hate is saying things that we all thought in the mid-90s. Okay, everything before, you know, the pandemic and before the woke takeover of the media, of our political and corporate class and the charity sector and academia, right? Before woke got a grip on Britain, well, the things that we thought would now be considered hate. So I'll give you an example. Saying there are just two sexes, a male and a female, right? That back in the day, that was biology. That's what they called facts, wasn't it? With a gentleman has the Willy Winkle, and he's got the meat and two veg, a family show, and some of you are eating, so I'll just leave it at that. But the gentleman has a Willy Winkle, a Frankfurter. We don't need euphemisms. It's a grown-up show. There is no need. You know what I'm saying. Love sword. Okay. And the thing is, right, so that is the gentleman. And then the lady has a Mew Mew. Right? I think we know that. That is biology. I learned that at GCSE biology. The gentleman has the Willy Winkle and the lady has the Mew Mew, right? If you said that now, that is hate speech, folks. Okay, and you'll have the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies taking you down to Chinatown for stating a scientific fact. What else is hate? Having a border, right, and defending the idea of borders and national boundaries. That's hate, obviously. We're supposed to have open borders now, which, by the way, is a Trojan horse for communism. You heard it here first. Oh, what about this? Western history being complex but largely glorious. Because, you know, in the mid-90s, we took the view that, yes, we had slavery and, you know, we invaded countries and we were very, there was a lot of bloodshed, a lot of wealth amassed as a result of our military prowess and our ruthlessness as a nation. We owned a quarter of the world, and that was, you know, you cannot make an omelette without breaking a couple of eggs, right? So the British Empire was not without sin Most definitely not. But what is a legacy of empire, representative democracy, infrastructure in some of the poorest, most deprived nations on earth? You know, rail lines, water towers, electricity, roads, the rule of law, free speech, cricket. We have given, free markets. So I would humbly suggest that Britain's history is complex, but predominantly glorious. But if you said that now, and thank God I didn't say it. I didn't say it, did I, Sam? This isn't going. Can you dump that? Can you dump me saying that British history is glorious? Because if that gets out, then my brief return to talk, the home of common sense, will be, it'll be blink and you'll miss it. I was cancelled a few months ago. I'm going to get cancelled again for saying that our history is predominantly glorious. And I say that as an Irishman. So I actually have a degree of detachment here about how great this country is. I have the patriotic fervour of the immigrant, most definitely. But we'll talk about what kind of immigration we need in just a moment, because there are different types of immigration, and we'll come to that. But yeah, Western history, complex but largely glorious. That's Hate 2, and you will be visited upon by the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies. So according to these state-funded hate hunters, who are, by the way, the good people, you're bad. For your mid-90s opinions, you're a bad person, okay? And you are bad that you don't want a man in a frock entering women's spaces and accommodated in women's prisons. You're a bad, bad person for not accepting that. So, according to these folks in Leicester, it turns out that the British countryside is racist, and I quote, overwhelmingly white. It's just so white. I thought it was quite green, by the way, because of all the rain and sunshine, but that's another story. So the countryside is too white. Now, wait a minute. I'm very confused. You're going to have to help me here, guys, because I'm not, you're smarter than me. Can you help me with this? 03444991000. Is invoking skin colour, whatever the colour, irrespective of it, but is invoking skin colour, is that not racist itself? 03444991000. I'm very confused. Is calling the countryside overwhelmingly white not also racist? Because wasn't that the point about Martin Luther King, that I judge you on the content of your character, not the colour of your skin? And yet, the good people at the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies, who hate the truth, are not going to be happy about it. And they're not happy that the countryside is overwhelmingly white and they're the good people. Rural racism is what we've got. And unfortunately, because of alliteration, it's bound to stick. It's got a nice little rhythm to it, hasn't it? Rural racism. And I need to do a deep dive on this. Maybe you can help me. Obviously, you've got listeners and viewers across the country, including in our great cities and also in the countryside. Can you help me identify the aspects of the countryside that are racist? Is it the sheep? Because I suspect that I do think the sheep are pretty xenophobic. And the cows, I know that if the cows had the vote, it would be reform all day long. The cows love Richard Tice and Nigel Farage. What exactly is racist in the countryside? We are told that the countryside is a hotbed of white supremacy. In this report, academics claim that ethnic minority communities face challenges in the countryside because the countryside is so overwhelmingly white. Now, the point about this show, by the way, is that we have a very broad and very diverse audience. Talk is, it's a global product, it's the home of common sense, but we talk to the world and we talk to the whole country, and Britain is a diverse nation. We have every nationality here. It's a big old melting pot. And when we had sensible levels of legal net migration, it did work very well. Because that's the point about immigration. It's the dosage. There are very few people who are just against immigration to the end. Very few people, partly because most people here have got some bloodline connected to the French. I mean, look at the royal family. They're all Germans, aren't they? Guten Tag. Wie geht's denn? Auf die Schnelltreppe, Dankeschön, Mädchen. Right? We're all, in a sense, we're all from somewhere else. I'm not, by the way, denying the principle of Englishness and Welshness and Scottishness and Ulster as well, of course. There are people whose bloodline goes back generations or whatever. But Britain is a successful, diverse country. But what's happening is that grifters like these people at the University of Leicester seek to divide us because it's an industry now. And what's interesting is that they actually patronise and condescend people of colour, because they're actually saying that people from ethnic minority communities face specific challenges. But wait a minute, is that not talking down to them? Is that not patronising? Is that not condescending? Is that not, wait for it, racist? There'll be people listening to this who are British Asians, okay? There'll be Jews listening to this, and Muslims, and there will be Irish and Scots, and there will be black people, and there will be South Americans. There'll be people from all over the world listening to this show. And I want to ask you whether you feel that this report from the University of Leicester isn't incredibly patronising to anyone of colour, anyone of an ethnic background, and incredibly patronising, and not just that, but racist to anyone of ethnic background. Do you know that rather posh outdoor store, the North Face? Are you familiar with the North Face, Samara? You probably got a bit of North Face gear, because Samara's, let me tell you, she's a very absolute clothes horse, very stylish, and no doubt she rocks a bit of North Face in the winter. It's a premium outdoor brand where, by the way, they charge you like 500 quid for a couple of grams of Gore-Tex. It's a complete racket, but there you go. And they had a special unconscious bias course, which they had to scrap because of public outrage. Because in this unconscious bias, they actually talked about the countryside, and it was full of ideas of white privilege. By the way, there's a few problems with white privilege. What about the young British boys who are white, who don't go to university and leave school with almost no qualifications? The intake into higher education of poor white boys is the lowest intake of any group in our society. Do they have white privilege? Just asking for a friend. 0344 499 1000. Give me a call if you've got white privilege. We'll talk about that. But the other issue, so this North Face special course that you had to go on, the North Face, it was actually, I think it was the customers that were encouraged to do this North Face diversity form that you'd fill out. Oh, that was it. It was a couple of years ago, and it was, you get a discount on your clothes if you filled out this unconscious bias form. So it contained the contested idea of white privilege, which, by the way, it's also racist in a number of ways. It's racist against white people to pick them out and say you're privileged, because picking people out on skin colour and saying anything about them is racist. You're welcome. But not just that, but if you're saying white people have privilege, well, then you're saying that people of colour are underprivileged, which is making them a victim and putting them down. And therefore that's racist. Anyhow, make it make sense. So they had this question on the North Face form, right, when you filled out your unconscious what's it. And it said, last time you were in the countryside, how many black people did you see? That was a genuine question on the form. Last time you were in the countryside, how many black people did you see? Now, first of all, what a question to ask. And secondly, who in their right mind goes to the countryside and rather than enjoy the fresh air and the bracing walk and the lovely green fields and a lovely cool wind on your cheeks, the lovely wind that blows across, like, you know, the Yorkshire Dales, you know, rather than enjoy the rural idyll, North Face would like you to go around counting black people. Maybe get a little notepad out and just, every time you see someone of colour, get that written down. It's quite extraordinary. And these people are so not self-aware, they don't realise what total hypocrites they are and how toxic and poisonous they are for our society. Because here's what I want. I want us all to be British. And I don't want to hear about rural racism, and I don't want to hear about diversity this or equity that. Everyone that's here is a British person. If you come to the country, my folks came into the UK in the late 50s, and they made a decision, which is we're going to become British people. They didn't give up their Irish heritage and the songs and the food and the culture and their religion, of course not. But they became British people, right? And that's what most people do when they come to this country. And you've got organisations like the University of Leicester who hate that. But they don't want Britishness to be something which is celebrated, and they don't want to bring us together, which is why there is a pressure group called Don't Divide Us, which is a multi-ethnic group of Brits who hate all this woke stuff and who are absolutely against the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies. I'll just give you a couple of other details on this before we get to the break and get reaction from a brilliant, brilliant commentator. We've got the overwhelming whiteness of the countryside creates a feeling of discomfort. If you're uncomfortable around people who have a certain skin color, maybe that's your problem, right? Apparently, there's a psychological burden that comes with navigating predominantly white spaces. Well, what are these predominantly white spaces? Is this the farmer's market? Is it the pub, beer garden? Is it the cow shed? A few of the cows are white. Is that a problem too? Are the cows overwhelmingly white? The report also raises concerns that traditional pub culture and other monocultural customs are exclusionary. And there you have it, the mask has slipped. So there are concerns that traditional pub culture and other monocultural customs are exclusionary. This is the contempt with which they hold our traditions. Monocultural custom. It's the pub where you go and have a pint of old speckled hen. So really what this is it's an attack on British tradition. It's an attack on British history. It's an attack on British culture. These people will tell you that the flag is offensive. It's suffused with racist messaging, the flag of this country. And now the pub is exclusionary. The dartboard is exclusionary. The pool table, the salt and vinegar crisps, the busty barmaid, there I said it. Yep, she's busty. The busty barmaid is exclusionary. A pint of lager top is exclusionary. Pork scratchings, well, obviously, don't even go there. The countryside apparently lacks appropriate facilities to meet religious and cultural needs, and does not cater for dietary norms that are rooted in religious or cultural practice. So basically what they're talking about is replacing your lovely local country pub with a halal butcher and a kosher butcher and a prayer area, which used to be a cow shed. The world's gone mad. This is insane. And do you know what adds insult to injury at the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies? We're paying for this rubbish. I'll get reaction from a top commentator after this.
I'd be depressed if I was going to be deported because I supported a prescribed terrorist group. I think that's a rather silly thing to have done, but I think, honestly, the fact that we have this drip feeding of stories, and it's almost every day that we have a story of an example of somebody not being able to be deported because of some very silly reason. There was the example, wasn't there, the other day of the Pakistani gentleman who had broken the law several times and was going to be deported, but he can't be deported to Pakistan because he is an alcoholic and alcohol is banned in Pakistan. And you were sat there going, oh, for heaven's sake.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So, the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies have said the countryside is overwhelmingly white and problematic for anyone of an ethnic background that enters it. Let's get reaction now from Rafe Heidel-Manku, who is a historian and broadcaster and a very good friend of mine. Hello, Rafe. Good to see you again.
Great to be with you, Mark.
Well, your reaction to this report?
Well, you know, I'm just so sick and tired, as I'm sure all of your listeners and viewers are, with these ridiculous loons posing as academics, desperately searching for evidence of racism. So look, you know, you mentioned this University of Leicester. Let's just consider this. The University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies. I mean, you know, that name alone tells you this is probably an utterly biased organization. Rather than trying to look vainly for bare evidence of racism in the countryside, you'd think they would be more focused on the racism in their hometown of Leicester. You know, this is a city that had riots recently between Hindus and the anti-Hindu Muslim mobs that clashed in the streets there. Leicester is a tinderbox of racial tensions between ethnic minority communities, and we know, of course, that the Islamic hardline conservatives are anti-Semitic, misogynistic, homophobic, and have hatred for other religions. So why isn't the University of Leicester Centre for Hate Studies looking on it at its own doorstep? The reason, of course, is because they don't care about hate at all. In fact, they are the ones who are hateful. They hate traditional Britain. And I think we need to understand this. Make no mistake about the true motives here. The British people are being, they're being demoralized, they're being denigrated in a prolonged war of attrition that seeks to actually undermine British culture, British heritage, and the way of life. And these race zealots, like you get at the University of Leicester, who say that the countryside is racist or that British culture is racist, they don't care about ethnic minorities at all. They have a visceral hatred for Britain and the West, and they are seeking to undermine it almost at every opportunity. You know, every day it seems there's a different institution coming out telling the British people they are racist, their culture is racist, their history is racist, their national heroes are racist. Now even the countryside is racist. And if you ever wanted proof that Britain today is a post-revolutionary society whose institutions have been completely captured by ideological apparatchiks trying to transform the soul of the nation, then this is it. Because, you know, you have to ask, why are these people attacking the countryside? It's because English, Welsh, Scottish, and Ulster, Northern Irish identities are intrinsically linked to the landscape. If you asked an Englishman to conjure up an image of England, and thoughts of his will go immediately to the countryside. You know, there's the gently rolling hills and the patchwork fields of England's green and pleasant land. The countryside epitomizes both nation and love of nation. It's a deeply emotional, almost spiritual connection with the ancient heart of this country. And so if you denounce the countryside as racist, you are directly attacking both the nation and national identity. We've seen it with the University of Leicester, we've seen it with the National Trust, with the British Library, with universities and museums and others. And they're going to create a future where the British people are no longer allowed to have any pride or trust or belief in the nation, and that's their ultimate goal. And actually it's working, because if you ask British youth today, what is the number one issue facing Britain, they won't say Brexit or climate change. They think it's racism. They think racism is the biggest issue facing this country, even though the world's leading international survey repeatedly shows that Britain is the world's third least racist nation, behind Brazil and Sweden. Rather than trying to focus all the time on stoking up division about racism, why don't we actually celebrate the fact that Britain is one of the world's most tolerant and most welcoming countries? Even the EU admitted in a recent survey that Britain was the best country in Europe for black people.
Just to be fair to the University of Leicester, are they not right to devote some resources and some efforts to tackling the racism that does still exist in this country? And if people of an ethnic background do feel like they're not really that comfortable in a rural setting. Maybe that needs to be addressed?
Well, look, if I go to rural China or rural India or rural Africa, imagine saying that I felt a psychological burden by going into areas where I was a minority, for example. I mean, me and my friends, we've been to Africa, to Asia, to the Middle East. And when we've been in those places, we've had the locals come up and photograph us and pose next to us for photographs because we looked so exotic. That's part of the pleasure of going to places like the rural parts of countries, because they are the most traditional, they have a different way of life, a different culture, and that's something we should celebrate rather than trying to make everything the same as it is everywhere else. The distinction between our diverse cities and rural life is so wonderfully stark because we feel as if we are experiencing something really special when we go into rural communities. And this idea, of course, that's going to the pub feels exclusionary, this monoculture. I mean, you think of Basil Fawlty in Fawlty Towers, paraphrasing him. What do you expect in the English countryside? What do you want? A Jamaican steel band? Do you want, African tribal dances or Chinatown in the countryside? It's absolutely ludicrous. In fact, the real racial tensions in this country are between ethnic minorities. They're not between the white community and ethnic minorities. Now, that normally insidious organization, Hope Not Hate, even they came out with a report in around 2019, 2020, which asked ethnic minorities whether there was more tension between the whites and non-whites or between different non-white communities, say black and Asian. And by a factor of 2 to 1, twice as many ethnic minorities said there was more tension between racial communities than between whites and non-whites, 40% versus 20%. I think that speaks volumes. We need to stop this. The left always blame the right for stoking the culture wars. It's actually the left who constantly attack our identity and provoke the great British public through ludicrous reports like this.
Yes, well, it's their policies which spark the culture wars, isn't it? Here's a question for you. Does the countryside need more synagogues, more mosques and more halal butchers? That's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Jack says, Mark, re countryside racism. If this report is to be accepted, presumably Africa is racist for being too black and Asia is racist for being too brown. And Gary from Cumbria says, I drove in the music industry for 30 years from 1985 and I saw the lovely city of Leicester go to hell in a handcart. What an awful place now. Still with me, historian Rafe Hadel-Manku for a couple of minutes. And Rafe, in this report from the University of Leicester's hate department, they said that the countryside lacks appropriate facilities to meet religious and cultural needs and does not cater for dietary norms that are rooted in religious or cultural practice, such as kosher and halal, adding to feelings of exclusion. They say to tackle rural racism and increase diversity, a series of recommendations need to happen. The availability of halal food or spaces for prayer could make a significant difference in whether people feel comfortable visiting the countryside. Do they have a point that ethnic groups are not catered for in the countryside?
Well, why would you cater for them? When I was in Egypt, I was there during one of the Islamic festivals. I think it's Eid, where you have to fast food, and
that's no fun on holiday, is it?
I had to eat my dinner behind a cheap bedroom sheet that they hung up, and so I felt like I was a pariah having to eat my food behind this sheet, lest anyone get offended by seeing me eat my food. They have no problem defending and promoting their culture. Look, if you are a Muslim and you want to have halal food and you want to go to the countryside, here's a novel idea. Make a packed lunch. You know, that's not what we used to do when I was a child. Nice packed lunch, you can do your own thing. Personally, I think we should be banning halal food altogether in this country. I think it's remarkable that a nation that prides itself on its love of animals, you know, we famously have more laws in this country defending animals than defending children. People get so irate about battery hens or about fox hunting, for example, and yet here you have the slaughter of millions of animals in the most cruel and barbaric way. And those people you would think would speak up about this, those on the left, Greenpeace, PETA, all these organizations, mysteriously silent about this cruel.
And of course, worth pointing out, similar to kosher as well, although some would argue that you're talking about tradition and defending tradition. Well, that is the Muslim and Jewish tradition to prepare food in that way. The University of Leicester, Rafe, also say that rural businesses should adapt to improve cultural sensitivity, saying welcoming minoritized individuals into the countryside means more than tolerance. It requires thoughtful adaptation, sustained inclusion efforts, and a willingness to change. Now, if you invited someone to your house that was a smoker or a drinker, you'd make sure that you offered them a cigar or a little couple of fingers of whiskey. So what's the problem with doing that with regard to ethnic groups?
If they're look, the market decides these things, right? If there is a significant number of ethnic minorities going to a specific area, then the market will find a solution, and restaurants will cater for that. Up to now, there has been no need for that. You know, you don't put the cart before the horse. Let the people come, and then you supply them with what they want. I mean, another point here is, you know, my father's family are Asian Indians born in Kenya, and they would go for picnics, but they were quite rare amongst their community for going to picnics. You didn't see Africans going for picnics and so forth. We also need to understand that different cultures have different habits, and it's not necessarily the habits traditionally of every ethnic minority community to go into the countryside and to do those sorts of things. It's rather an Anglo-centric or a Eurocentric view to think that everybody needs to or wants to take part in the sorts of activities that we do, hiking in Scotland and so forth. You know, there's a reason that certain cultures do that more than other cultures. But look, you know, the Swiss had a referendum on building more mosques with minarets. If there is enough of a population of Muslims in an area, then yes, they should get a mosque. But again, if it's in the countryside, it needs to be respectful. No minaret, nothing that interferes with the natural landscape of England. The countryside is the last bastion of true Englishness and of English identity and culture. It's sacred to us. It's sacred spiritually. It resonates with us. It is the real essence of what the English, Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Ireland identities are. That must be protected. You know, if you look at places like St Paul's Cathedral, there's an Act of Parliament protecting the dome of St Paul's across the London skyline, so you can't build skyscrapers that cover up the view.
Yeah.
The same idea needs to be had for the English countryside. We must preserve it and make sure that we give that inheritance. We're only the custodians of it for one generation. We're the inheritors of our previous generations, and we must pass it on to the next generation.
Rafe, you're an absolute legend, and it's so great to see you again. Thank you for your time. We know you're up against it. We'll let you zoom off now. Rafe Heidel-Manku, historian, your reaction to what he had to say. This is what Judy had to say on white privilege.
You can be anything you want in this country. Education is free. Well, when I say it's free, it's paid for by the taxpayers. You can do anything you like if you put the hard graft in. Obviously, you can't be an opera singer if you can't sing. But if you're realistic about what you want to be and what you want to do, you can achieve it. Anybody can. My late former husband was brought up in abject poverty. He would have been tickled pink to have known he was privileged.
Listen, Judy, what a brilliant, brilliant voice note that was. Do give me a call sometime, Judy, because I think you talk a lot of sense. 0344 499 1000. Next up, ITV star Rylan Clark is under pressure from the woke mob to quit his presenting duties with the channel because he said that we have to end illegal routes across the channel. So, is he a hero or a bigot? That's next.
I'd be depressed if I was going to be deported because I supported a prescribed terrorist group. I think that's a rather silly thing to have done. But I think, honestly, the fact that we have this drip feeding of stories, and it's almost every day that we have a story of an example of somebody not being able to be deported because of some very silly reason. There was the example, wasn't there, the other day of the Pakistani gentleman who had broken the law several times and was going to be deported, but he can't be deported to Pakistan because he is an alcoholic and alcohol is banned in Pakistan. And you were sat there going, oh, for heaven's sake.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So ITV star Rylan Clark has said that we need to stop the boats. Let's take a listen to him speaking on ITV.
I find it absolutely insane that all these people, one, are risking their lives coming across the channel like that they are, But two, when they get here, it does seem, and I think this is why a lot of Labour voters as well are now sitting there going, there's something wrong here. It seems, welcome, come on in. This is the narrative we're being fed. Here's the hotel. Here's the phones. Here's the iPad. Here's the NHS in reception of your hotel. Here's 3 meals a day. Here's a games room in the hotel. Have a lovely time and welcome. And then there's people that have lived here all their lives that are struggling.
Yeah.
They're homeless. Let's not even discuss our homeless. That are people living on the streets, veterans, all of this. Now, this isn't me getting on my soapbox because, let me be honest, everyone's going to have an opinion about this and you're going to upset someone some which way. I believe that something major needs to be done about this.
Does Ryland Clark's bold intervention demonstrate that securing our borders has now finally entered the political mainstream? And is this a victory for people power? Is this guy a bellwether for the political discourse? Has the Overton window shifted? Let's get the views of another good friend of mine, a man that spoke a lot of sense during the COVID-19 pandemic, the fearless social and political commentator James Melville. Hi, James.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm very well, and it's great to see you again, James. I'm glad we're not mid-pandemic and talking about PCR tests and all the rest of it, and masks. Don't get me started on masks. Can I ask you about Ryland Clark? Did it feel like a cultural moment when he spoke out on This Morning?
Yeah, I think sometimes it goes that way. If you get some people from the left, I suppose, who break ranks. I mean, I know from my own experience that if you go against them, then you get purged. But people have got to say what they believe. And I think this is, on this general issue, an Overton window shifting moment, in particular on illegal migration. And actually what he said was very reasonable. It was balanced. He pointed out the historical benefits of immigration, of which there's been many. Go back to the Windrush generation. But there is an issue right now with illegal migration, particularly the numbers that are coming across the channel, the cost with the hotels, and then possibly the solution to the hotels, the cost of rental accommodation, free rental accommodation. And he pointed this out, and he was pretty fair-minded. But it doesn't surprise me that in certain quarters he's getting a pile-on. I've seen it before. It happens many times. J.K. Rowling's another one, for instance, on the trans debate.
Yeah.
But I think what he's done, and the reason it's had so much coverage, isn't so much about the reaction from certain quarters. He's tapped into public mood. The public mood has shifted on this, and I think you're right to point this out, Mark. I think this is part of the national conversation now, and I think this is a good thing, because far too long, if anyone raises anything, even a question on migration or legal migration, then they're smeared as a bigot, a xenophobe, and a racist. And that's that lazy trope smearing that we all went through over COVID and many other issues. It's time to have a grown-up debate where people can discuss this in the round and not get accused of being a racist and a bigot. His views were fair-minded.
Yes, he's broken ranks. What do you think has motivated him to do this?
I think it's just his opinion, and good on him for stating it. There's far too many people, I think, who follow their echo chambers and their tribes, and they're too scared, if they've got a different opinion, to raise their head above the parapet and state it. We need more individuals from all walks of life to say, do you know what, I'm going to go against my tribe because I believe in something else. He's not a racist, he's not a bigot, he's fair-minded, but it's powerful when someone from the left goes against sort of the woke views, because it does widen the debate. It normalizes difficult topics. And if we're going to have a free society, and that's all up for grabs in terms of freedom of speech right now, we need individuals like that to open up tricky topics and sometimes go against their own echo chambers.
Yes, and he's unique because the media establishment are notoriously cowardly on that front, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. We saw it time and time again, whereby it's almost like they wait and see what their side says en masse, and then they follow that. I'm a great believer that we need more people on an issue-by-issue basis to say what they think. What happens is they get smeared and it's all these lazy tropes in their direction. But there's something really admirable about an individual who goes, you know what, this is my view. And I think the reason this one's so powerful is not just from the fact he came from the left, it's the fact that he's reflecting public mood. And we need more people to come out and say what they think without getting smeared. But more and more people will do this, because actually on the issue of illegal migration, This is an important issue, and the government response, not just with Labour, but the previous government, the Tories as well, they've been asleep at the wheel. And that's why this issue has now become mainstream, because the numbers are just too high. And at time, during a cost of living crisis, where people are struggling to make ends meet, and they look at this and the taxpayers' cost of hotels and free accommodation, and they've got right to ask questions where their own tax money is being spent.
Most definitely, and the elephant in the room, which is legal net migration as well. It's my strong contention that the British people are not anti-immigration. It's simply the dosage, it's the scale that we've had in the last few years. I mean, the amazing stat that I'm always quoting, James, is that 1 in 60 Brits entered this country last year, and 1 in 25 entered Britain in the last 4 years. These are crazy numbers. Do you think that we will eventually be able to have a dispassionate and honest conversation about immigration, both illegal and legal?
I think it's getting there. I think the Overton window has shifted. I mean, if you look at the support for reform, I think there's a number of reasons for that. But I think immigration is one of them, and what Nigel Farage is saying, and also the diametric opposite with the government, who are not addressing it. And you get Keir Starmer every day saying he's going to smash the gangs and stop the boats. Well, he's been there for a year, nothing's been done, and the numbers are north of 50,000 in terms of on his watch across the channel with the small boats. So I think it's a good thing when the likes of Ryland mention this sort of thing, because it does widen the debate. And I think we're at a point now, because of the cost of living crisis, because of the taxpayers' cost of this, there's a discussion to be had about illegal migration. But you're right, Mark, there has to be a discussion about migration numbers generally. Net migration over the last 3 years is over 2 million. And so the numbers since 2001 have gone through the roof. So therefore, we should be at a mature point in society where we can have these discussions in the round without people getting trope smeared. But that's part of the problem. That's the reason why I think part of the Overton window shift is that people are moving away from that wokeism. Yeah. And that wokeism comes attached with a lot of bullying and a lot of slander and a lot of smearing. But I think more and more people don't care anymore.
No.
And I think COVID was actually a pivotal moment with that, because more and more people came around to the conclusion that the lockdowns don't work, the masks don't work, and so on. And more people over time started stating their opinion over this. And social media's helped with that as well. So the more we can have good dialogue, respectful dialogue, differences of opinion, then the more that our society and our political debate moves. And on this particular issue with immigration, I think it's a healthy step that there's more and more mainstream discussions about this.
Most definitely. Well, of course, in America, the woke dam was burst with the election of Donald Trump. Have we got to wait 4 years for that to properly happen here?
4 more years of this lot in power? That's purgatory for us all. I mean, I've gone on record saying that, I have no time for the Tory government, but I think based on the first year, this is pretty much the worst government that I've known. But it's not just about bad policy, it's about their tone. And that comes right from the top, where you've got a sanctimonious doer leader who talks to us like we're all naughty school children. And I think people are fed up with that. And I think there is a movement in the UK. And, I think generally British people are, it takes a lot for our feathers to be ruffled. I think we tend to be a very polite lot. It takes a lot for us to get miffed.
Correct.
But I think we're at that point because we've had 4 or 5 years of the cost of living crisis and the highest tax burden, and we're questioning what the government are doing to change the many, many problems that this country faces in so many different areas. And based on the first year, Labour had that opportunity, that window of opportunity to do something different to the Tories, and they haven't done it. And yet we have a Prime Minister who's still lecturing us, plus breaking promises. And the public are looking at the current government compared to the last government, thinking it's all basically 2 cheeks of the same backside, and they want something different.
Of course, the Prime Minister would argue he's fixing 14 years of Tory failure. It's all about opinions. They do have 4 years to go. Briefly, before you go, James, I just wonder whether, we talked about the Overton window changing, but are we now starting to demonise anyone that's an immigrant? Because take a listen to this clip of a British Asian businessman being racially abused on Sky News. Take a listen to this.
How old are you?
32.
32.
Yeah.
How? What do you
Yeah, no, we should... That's the issue we have using in our country. You got in our kids. This is our country. How about becoming your country if you let your kids?
Let's walk. To avoid an escalation of the confrontation, I attempted to move Zaheen away. Are you okay?
Yeah. Because I'm used to this conflict.
No, but that's
mine.
No one should be used to.
This is a difficult one, James, isn't it? Because I'm very sympathetic to public anger about the migrant hotels, which are costing upwards of £5 billion a year to the taxpayer. I think the boats have got to be stopped unilaterally. I think that legal net migration is too high. People are angry. Towns and cities are changing beyond recognition, and we're getting poorer. And there are definitely issues around national security and also policing. So, you know, whilst I hear that, that's an unedifying scene. Are we overcorrecting? Are we now demonising anyone who's an immigrant?
That's the problem, and that sort of clip, it's unacceptable. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of people over a number of generations, from an immigration point of view, had huge benefits to our culture and society. And so we need to get a balancing act. It's the same with most issues. It's about, I can't stand extremism. And somewhere in the middle, you have to have a nuanced and grown-up debate to find the right solution. So yes, we can talk about the concerns of illegal migration, the numbers of net migration, but we should be playing the ball, not the man on this issue. We should be talking about the issues, the numbers, the cost to the taxpayer, and how it fits in within a cost of living crisis, but not demonising hard-working individuals because of colour or creed. You know, we're better than that, surely, in Britain. We have no time for that sort of behaviour whatsoever. But that doesn't mean that we can't discuss some of the problems around migration right now. But, you know, it is a balancing act. And I can see it's almost like a sort of Trojan horse effect, that when the debate, well, I think it's healthy to discuss the debate, that it does run a risk that it overheats and it ends up with the clip that we just watched.
James, you were a hero during COVID and you remain a hero to this day, talking common sense about tensions around immigration. Do check out James Melville's excellent X feed. He's one of the biggest names on X in this country, and understandably so. Folks, listen, we've got a really, really busy hour to come. Another free speech row as Father Ted writer Graham Linehan is arrested at Heathrow Airport by 5 police officers, treated like a terrorist for tongue-in-cheek remarks made on social media about trans people. Piers Morgan and J.K. Rowling have condemned the police's actions. I'll get a reaction from Britain's free speech czar, Lord Toby Young. What a booking. He's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk, the home of common sense. Mark Dolan in for the majestic Kevin O'Sullivan for one night only and a busy 2 hours to go. As the Home Secretary's one-in, one-out policy with France lies in tatters, and with a controversial new plan to welcome Gazans into Britain, should Keir Starmer sack Yvette Cooper in order to save his premiership? And here's a question for you on the phone lines. Is he going to shift right to Keir Starmer? And if so, could he out Farage, Nigel Farage, 0344 499 1000? And the Royal Peace Summit is on, but as King Charles and Prince Harry reportedly prepare to meet this September, one member of the family is reportedly not happy, Prince William, who is said to be furious at the idea of bringing Harry back into the royal fold. I'll bring you more on this bitter civil war dividing the monarchy. But first, another day, another free speech row. And this relates to Father Ted co-creator Graham Linehan, who has revealed that he was arrested at Heathrow Airport over social media posts sharing his views on trans people. Writing on Substack, the 57-year-old comedy writer and stand-up said that after flying into the UK from Arizona, he was detained by 5 armed officers and put into a cell before being questioned over posts published on X in April. During questioning, he said a nurse checked on him and found his blood pressure had reached stroke territory, I should say, so he was taken to A&E. Now, let's take a look at what exactly he said, because many people have been critical of the actions of the Met Police, including Piers Morgan and J.K. Rowling, who have suggested that it's a complete overreaction. 3 tongue-in-cheek social media posts. Don't get me wrong, they were pretty spicy. They were pretty controversial. But isn't that the point about free speech? We'll get to the detail of those posts in just a moment. But first, for reaction, I'm delighted to head straight over to the House of Lords and Britain's unofficial free speech czar, the director of the Free Speech Union, Lord Toby Young. Lord Young, welcome to Talk.
Hi, Mark.
Good to have you on the programme. Your reaction to this story, it seems to have been received with widespread opprobrium.
Yes, I think very few people are defending how the police behaved, rather surprisingly, including Downing Street, which have Downing Street issued a statement earlier, more or less throwing the police under a bus. So what happened, Mark? I don't think you quite captured the full horror of it in your introduction. So Graham Linehan was met off a transatlantic flight. He flew in from Arizona yesterday at noon by 5 armed police officers at Heathrow. He was arrested and detained for 16 hours and questioned about 3 tweets. And he was only released when a nurse discovered his blood pressure was so high that he had to go straight to A&E. The police seem to be completely at a loss as to exactly what offence they're investigating Graham for having supposedly committed. Yesterday, they said he was being investigated for having incited violence. Well, there's no such offence on the statute books. They just pulled that one out of their navel. They've changed that to an offence under Part 3A of the Public Order Act. But Part 3A of the Public Order Act criminalises stirring up hatred on religious grounds or on the grounds of sexual orientation. It does not criminalise stirring up hatred against people on the basis of their transgender status. So again, he can't possibly have committed that offence. I'm told that the Metropolitan Police Press Office are going to come up with yet another offence, a third offence, tomorrow to try and justify their absolutely, inconceivable overreactions. I think it's just another example of the police being far too overzealous in their policing of social media posts, particularly people who post gender critical content, who criticize the trans rights agenda. It's as though the police have become the kind of paramilitary wing of the LGBTQ movement. It is absolutely extraordinary. This isn't the first time the Free Speech Union is defending Graham. We're paying for his legal team, though I doubt this will go to court. But this isn't the first case in which someone gender critical has found themselves, having their collars felt. 40% of all the cases we fought over 4,500 of Free Speech Union in the last 5 years, 40% have been gender critical feminists saying things like, I don't want to share changing rooms with biological men. I don't want to share lavatories with biological men. And for some reason, the police, arrest them, sometimes detain them for hours at a time, and then eventually release them without charge and decide to take no further action. And I'm sure that's what will happen in this case too. But, the police need to get their priorities straightened out. It's not their job to police the debate about gender and gender differences. That's a debate that needs to be thrashed out in the public square. It's not something that a supposedly impartial and neutral police force should be intervening on one side of. Particularly when there are so many other better things they could be doing. Only 1 in 5 reported shoplifting offences are investigated by the police. 75% of burglaries in 2023 went unsolved. Why are they wasting so much time policing our tweets when they could be policing our streets?
Does this demonstrate that the police are in the grip of ideological capture? Because it doesn't seem they got the memo that the Supreme Court recently ruled that biological sex is how you achieve the definition of a woman.
Yeah, that seems to have passed the police by. I think the root of the problem, is the College of Policing, which was created by the coalition government, headed by David Bonfire of the Quangos Cameron. So it was a new Quango created by the coalition government in 2014, and it took on responsibility for police training, amongst other things. And one of the first things the College of Policing did was come up with the concept of non-crime hate incidents.
Yeah.
So you can see the Orwellian direction of travel that was immediately embarked upon. And I think it's the College of Policing which are largely responsible for the wokeification of the police and have persuaded the police, particularly in England and Wales, that their job is to protect these beleaguered identity groups, these victim groups from persecution. Forget about upholding law and order. Forget about solving burglaries, auto theft, street crime of various kinds, shoplifting. No, their job is to protect these sacred identity groups from hurty words. And they just waste a huge amount of time and resources investigating things on social media that various activists and activist groups have complained about. And that seems to be what's happened in Graham Linehan's case.
Well, Lord Young, let's have a look at those hurty words from Graham Linehan on his X profile, which is at Glinner. That's how you'd find him. The first offending tweet was as follows. If a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent, abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls. The next one was a photo of some trans activists, and the subheading written by Graham Linehan was "A photo you can smell," and then finally followed up with "I hate them, misogynists and homophobes, F them." Is he testing the boundaries of free speech there, particularly the provocation to punch a trans person in the balls?
I don't think he is. Obviously, some people will find that language offensive. They'll think that's pretty intemperate. Some people will even think it's nasty, but I don't think it's against the law. And I think we're pretty clear it's not against the law because when trans rights activists protest outside events like the Battle of Ideas Festival, the annual conference of the LGB Alliance, whatever it might be, Kathleen Stock appearing in the Oxford Union, they wear T-shirts saying the only good turf is a dead turf, punch a turf, and they don't get arrested. They don't get arrested because that kind of theatrical pantomime incitement doesn't cross the threshold of lawlessness. I think the same license should have been extended to Graham in this case.
Although Lord Young, two wrongs don't make a right. Should he really be tweeting that you ought to punch someone in the balls? I mean, we obviously had that recent case of this Labour councillor talking about slitting people's throats. Of course, Lucy Connolly with her her suggestion of burning down migrant hotels. Is this really responsible language?
Well, I think, isn't he making a political point there? Isn't he just making it clear that as far as he's concerned, these so-called trans women are in fact biological men, and they have the testicles to prove it?
I think it's satirical in its flavour, isn't it, and provocative in that way.
It is, yeah. It's certainly not something that warrants being arrested by.
And a photo you can smell is actually quite funny, and I think will be appropriate for an Extinction Rebellion march as well. So I've got no problem with that. And you're allowed not to you're allowed. I mean, he says, I hate them, misogynists and homophobes, F them, as you say, intemperate language. But for you, none of this goes anywhere close to thwarting, but not being justified within the realm of free speech. Now, clearly, J.K. Rowling has stepped into this, and Piers Morgan, and even 10 Downing Street, as you mentioned, other celebrities as well, have condemned it. Could this be a turning point? Could this be a test case, Lord Young, for common sense?
Well, I'd like to say so, Mark, but every time I think we've touched rock bottom and I cry, peak woke, the pendulum has reached its apex, it's now going to swing back, something even more egregious happens. I sometimes feel like a man falling through a burning building, and every time I think I've touched rock bottom, I finally hit the basement, the floor gives way and I start falling again. I mean, we had the Julian Fuchs case a few months ago, an ex-special constable who got into a Twitter spat with a pro-Palestinian activist, said nothing which approached being unlawful. The activist seemingly complained. It was flagged up to the counter-extremism and counter-terrorism branch of the Metropolitan Police, and instead of filing it in the circular file, i.e. the bin, they referred it to Kent Police, who then went round to this poor ex-constable's house, mob-handed, arrested him, ransacked his house, discovered some Brexity books in his bookshelves, very suspicious, and only released him with a caution. The Free Speech Union took on that case, and quite quickly, the Chief Constable of Kent Police issued a grovelling apology, and we got him £20,000 in compensation for wrongful arrest and wrongful imprisonment. And you would have thought that would teach the police a lesson, be a little bit more cautious before going around mob-handed and arresting someone and detaining them for several hours next time, but seemingly not. So I fear, Mark, that this will only happen again.
Before I let you go, this has even come up as an issue in trade talks with the United States and the Vice President J.D. Vance. Do the Americans overstate the extent to which Britain is now and I quote, police state?
Well, calling Britain a police state may be jumping the gun a little, perhaps next year. But I do think that when J.D. Vance raised his concerns about the erosion of free speech in the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer batted those concerns away and said, we have no problem with free speech in the United Kingdom. We have a very proud tradition of upholding free speech. Thank you very much. I now think the police perhaps should be looking at Keir Starmer for having committed the crime of knowingly spreading false information, which was a crime created by the Online Safety Act, Section 197 of the Online Safety Act, and carries a maximum sentence of up to 51 weeks in jail. Perhaps Keir Starmer should now be sweating under the hot lights in a cell at Heathrow next time he returns from holiday for having breached Section 197 of the Online Safety Act and knowingly spread false information and dubiously claiming that we don't have a problem with free speech in this country. We clearly do. JD Vance is right. Take a look at yourself, Prime Minister.
There's a lot of anger about it out there, especially among my viewers and listeners. Do you think the Prime Minister will read the room and pivot on this issue and attempt to restore free speech in this country?
No, I don't, I'm afraid. I think we're going to have to wait for a change of government before that happens. No, I think things are only going to get worse between now and 2029. The government has already announced its intention of coming up with an official definition of Islamophobia. It's then going to roll that out across public bodies. That'll mean people losing their livelihoods for criticising the religion of Islam. It wants to criminalise conversion therapy. And I think it includes in that definition parents trying to talk their children out of having life-changing surgery because they're confused about what gender they are.
That's right, and that might be a psychologist sitting down or a counsellor sitting down with a 14-year-old and saying, are you sure you want to have an operation on your body which will change your life forever? And that could be classed as conversion therapy, right?
Yeah, and become a criminal offence punishable by up to 2 years in jail. So I'm afraid I don't think things are going to get any better. I think they're only going to get worse until we have a change of government.
Well, you're a very important voice in the House of Lords and within our political discourse. Lord Young, great to have you on the show. Great to hear you again. Lord Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union and Britain's unofficial free speech czar, increasingly very official. Listen, folks, lots more to get through. We need to talk about immigration now, because as the Home Secretary's one-in, one-out policy with France lies in tatters, and with a controversial new plan to welcome Gazans into Britain, should Keir Starmer sack Yvette Cooper in order to save his premiership? The brilliant Neil Hamilton is next.
%90 of British people will never live in a brand new house with underfloor heating, and it just should not be the case that you can break the law and within days be housed in a place like, well, not days, they've obviously spent some time in a hotel and then they'd be moved to, but this also opens up the secondary question that Labour are banging on about closing these hotels. But then the number of people arriving are at record levels. So they might close the hotels, but these people will still be being housed on the taxpayers' expense. And where are they going to move? They're going to move to houses of multiple occupancy.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, Channel migrants could be put in warehouses under a Labour scramble to accelerate the end of costly hotels and contain mounting voter fury. Plans to roll out digital ID to curb small boat arrivals working illegally are also under discussion at an urgent ministerial meeting today. But I've got to tell you that there are big problems for the Home Secretary because her much heralded one-in, one-out deal with France has been a complete failure, with 3,567 folks coming in and 0 leaving. So, should Sir Keir Starmer sack Yvette Cooper in order to get control of illegal immigration in this country and to rescue his ailing premiership? Who better to ask than former Conservative MP and also the former leader of UKIP, the brilliant Neil Hamilton. Neil, I think we've dragged you out of a dinner party to be here. Are you in drink?
Well, I brought a little sustenance with me, but you get a bit of Dutch courage, shall we say.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. The truth is that, you don't generally mince your words, and I reckon that Rioja will help things flow more smoothly. Yvette Cooper's in trouble, probably got the worst job in government, hasn't she, Neil?
Oh, I think there are a lot of competitors for that job under this.
Well, indeed. So, first of all, your appraisal of this deal with France, the one in, one out, which has so far seen no one leaving the United Kingdom.
Well, we've had 50,000 in, of course, in the last year, or that's the annualised rate. Anyway, the one out that we need is Yvette Cooper. Get rid of her. Although, there's a queue of equally incompetent and useless people behind her. So, because the Labour government doesn't really believe in serious immigration control, because ever since the Blair era, where they deliberately opened the floodgates of mass migration, they were glorying in this as diversity as a means of building the right in politics out of government. Now, of course, it's coming home to roost on them, because not only are they not deriving any benefit from mass migration, quite the opposite, but even amongst the political parties, there are new political parties who now represent these immigrant groups specifically. The new Corbynite party will be particularly doing this. So Labour are being squeezed at both ends. So anything that they're now trying to do, and it's all performative, it doesn't have any real substance behind it, is purely designed to try to mitigate the disastrous consequences for themselves of the policies that they themselves were responsible for introducing 20-odd years ago, which were enthusiastically then followed up by the Tories, and whom things got to the pinnacle of mass migration under Boris Johnson. So the whole political system actually has been skewed against real immigration control for actually most of my lifetime. And now the mass of the British public are waking up to what's happening, which is really a huge social experiment in cultural displacement. We are being displaced in our own country by millions of people who are coming in from different cultures who don't want to assimilate, and the bigger the proportion of the population that they represent, the more likely it is that we are going to be strangers in our own country, as Keir Starmer memorably said just a short time ago.
Well, indeed. And of course, a portion of immigrants do integrate and start businesses and contribute to the country economically and culturally and societally. But others do not. As you say, we have these parallel communities. And as we saw during those weekly so-called peace marches after October the 7th, that there are people in our midst who do not uphold British values, not to mention the small matter of the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs, who are the very definition of the multicultural experiment, failing, and drastically so, and failing the safety of young girls, possibly 250,000. But Neil, why did things accelerate so badly under Boris Johnson? You are a former Conservative MP, and Boris will have crossed your path from time to time. I'm sure you know the guy. What possessed him to allow 1 million people to enter the country legally every year?
Well, I don't think he's really a Conservative at all. He's fundamentally a Liberal. And he's, I don't think, had many serious ideas about anything very much. He's really an entertainer more than a politician. And he had no head for detail whatsoever. He was fundamentally a frivolous individual, I think, which is why his premiership, even though he had a majority of 80 in 2019, lasted such a short time.
Neil, was he not persuaded by civil servants and others in government that we needed these people to fill the skills gap?
Well, he probably was, but I don't know whether he even looked into the question as deeply as that slogan. Boris didn't really care. He was merely interested in headlines and what needed to be done to solve for today by another headline the problems of yesterday. So I don't regard him as a serious politician at all. But he relaxed all the visa requirements and income requirements for immigrants to come to this country, with the result that we had hundreds of thousands of people who were sort of low income economic migrants, as well as vast numbers of students who weren't really students at all, but merely wanted the title so that they could then come in themselves and then bring their families with them, which at long last even this government sees is something that needs to be stopped as a massive abuse of our hospitality. And the Tories, I'm afraid, completely wrecked our country in this respect. Labour started the rot, the Tories continued it, and it's still continuing even today, because none of these sticking plaster solutions that the government is trying to persuade us are going to do the job will work. And the problem is getting worse and worse and worse. The 50,000 across the channel in small boats is merely the tip of the iceberg. What about the people who are still coming in lorries and by other routes, the overstayers, massive numbers, and we've got millions of these people in this country. We don't actually know the true numbers because no records are kept of people leaving the country. So once they're let in, we've no idea how many of them stay here. You can bet your bottom dollar it's the overwhelming majority. And so we've now got 7 million Muslims in this country, whereas 20 years ago we had a fraction of that. Now, I have nothing against Muslims in themselves, but once you have a significant proportion of a country which is represented by a huge number of people who fundamentally have foreign cultural assumptions, then the nature of the country itself changes. And as a result, apart from the economic effects, the cultural effects ultimately are going to be disastrous. We've seen divided societies and the effect that they have. We see it now most dramatically, of course, in Palestine and the Middle East. We've seen it all around the world over my lifetime. And now we have deliberately imported this into this country, an incubus which I'm afraid was inevitably going to develop in this way. And you can't have unassimilable cultures living side by side once the population figures reach the kind of proportions that we're now in danger of seeing.
And of course, there are millions of British Muslims who contribute to society and who participate in the British project wholeheartedly, including, by the way, the former chairman of Reform UK, Zia Yusuf, and many others. But you're right to point out that what you have here is a political, religious and cultural constituency who don't entirely dovetail with British values. We saw that in the so-called peace marches after October the 7th. And let's not forget, Sir Keir Starmer, as Prime Minister, had to... I think he was Leader of the Opposition at the time. He begged the Speaker of the House of Commons to scrap an amendment on a ceasefire vote in the House of Commons because he feared for the safety of his own MPs from angry British Muslims if they hadn't supported a ceasefire in Gaza. So that is certainly not rule of law. That's not the British way. Can I ask you, the ONS, Neil, have predicted that legal net migration will settle to around 300,000 to 400,000 per year for the rest of the Parliament. Where do you see the illegal migrant crossings, the channel numbers, being in 4 years' time?
Well, they may even be higher than they are now. And this is the...
Is Keir Starmer that stupid?
Well, far be it from me to evaluate, but his record doesn't really fill us with a great deal of confidence.
No, but he's a political pragmatist. What he does like is to be in power. Do you not think he'll seek to move the dial on the illegal immigration issue?
Well, but are they prepared to do what really needs to be done? Are they prepared to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, the UN Refugee Convention? If they're not prepared to do either of those things, then they can't stop the legal challenges to the policy that they say they want to implement. Ultimately, we used to have the rule of law. Now we have the rule of lawyers. Keir Starmer is a lawyer. Lord Hermer is like a vulture on the telegraph wire, sitting above him, ready to pounce whenever anything which is likely to be successful is proposed. Because these people fundamentally do not believe in the kind of Britain that you and I and most of the people of this country believe in. They believe that we are part of some vast global, diverse culture which can all live side by side with one another in a peacefulness and in a kind of a global paradise of diversity. But we all know, looking around at the world and the kind of conflicts that we see, cultural conflicts, and I'm not talking here about deliberate takeovers, invasions of countries. I'm just talking about what happens when you get cultures that are so far apart from each other, living within the same boundaries. Each is likely to rub up against the other and cause friction. And when it gets to a certain level, then you get the blow-ups. What we see in the protests around the country at the minute, at the impotence of our government in the face of what's happening, is merely the first foretaste of a much more bitter cup that we're going to sip in the years to come. Do we really want this in our country? Do we want civil disorder? Because we know from so many examples in recent history, let alone going back further, that this is the inevitable consequence of unassimilable cultures trying to live side by side with one another. Look at India and Pakistan. And what happened during partition. That's 70, 80 years ago. And we see this all around the world, where the countries are riven apart. And we used to be a tolerant country. We used to be a welcoming country. This is not something which can be sustained indefinitely.
Before I let you get back to your Pinot Grigio or your Cabernet Sauvignon, whatever it is you're enjoying at the moment, and rightly so, Neil, can I ask you, you former leader of UKIP, what's your appraisal of Nigel Farage? And if he becomes our next Prime Minister, can he tackle these serious issues facing the country?
Well, Nigel is a great communicator and a great campaigner, and he's done a brilliant job in creating the political force which is reform. He uniquely, in my lifetime, from outside Parliament, has had a massive effect upon the whole political system and the direction of politics in this country by, first of all, creating through UKIP the campaign for the Brexit referendum, and then winning the Brexit referendum, with which, of course, the Uni Party has done absolutely nothing since 2016, completely wasted opportunity, not least with immigration policy, although the problems we now face don't actually relate to the EU, but to the rest of the world. But whether Nigel is capable of translating himself from a kind of protest politician campaigner into a leader of a government is another matter altogether. It's a completely different set of skills that is needed. Very few individuals can manage to do both tasks very well.
Is he cut from the same cloth as your former boss, Margaret Thatcher? Does he have her pedigree, her attention to detail, her work ethic, her focus, her courage, her backbone, her vision?
Well, I don't think there are many people who would combine all those qualities as she did in her body. She certainly was a master of detail. She survived on 4 hours sleep a night. She just absorbed facts and documents, and I saw this at very, very close quarters over many, many years. Nigel is not one of those. He has his great qualities. I admire him in those respects, and he has been essential, I think, to solve many of the problems of our country, which the current Uni Party has created. But I think the jury's out ultimately on how successful a reform government would be. I think reform is shaping up at last into a party which has at least the ingredients of what is needed, but we're a long way yet from forming a reform government. Unless there's a sort of mass assassination of MPs, we're not going to have a general election for another 4 years. So who knows what can happen. But I don't see any signs of the Labour Party learning any serious lessons, and I don't see the Conservative Party even as yet having woken up to what happened in the general election last year. So I think reform has an open goal into which they're kicking balls.
Last thing before I let you go, we love having you, and my viewers and listeners loving your words of wisdom, Neil. By the end of this Parliament, at least another 200 million people will have entered the country legally, legal net migration, roughly
million,
around.
I don't think so.
Around 2 million. Sorry, so say, but because you've got around eventually settling to 400k per year. With another million this year. So a ballpark of 2 and a bit million between now and the next election of coming legally, and 250,000 illegal immigrants based upon the latest figures, which is 50k a year. So by the next election, Neil Hamilton, has the damage been done? Is the genie out of the lamp? Is it game over for the country anyway?
Well, if the figures carry on as you predict, and I think those predictions are perfectly reasonable, we're going to need a lot of tents, aren't we? Because there isn't the physical infrastructure of the country to sustain these levels of immigration, let alone schools, hospitals and all the rest of it. These are completely unsustainable levels of migration. And we need to have a policy of mass deportation of illegal immigrants, just as Donald Trump is doing in the United States. None of the old parties has the slightest will to effect this. I hope Reform, if they get in a position to form the government of the country, will deliver on this promise. Because if we don't, then I'm afraid this country is screwed, and we're going to have mass unrest from the people who feel that they're being displaced in their own country, as well as those who've come to this country expecting a better life and are not going to get it. So, we are facing, I think, one of the biggest systemic crises that I've seen in my lifetime. I hate to be apocalyptic, but I'm afraid that's what I see.
Neil, we're so grateful that you stepped out of the dinner party. Get back to the toad in the hole and Christine's special gravy, and of course that lovely glass of Chateau Neuf du Pape. You are a star. We loved having you. We'll catch up soon.
I'm sure Christine would be pleased with being called a toad in the hole.
Careful, we're in trouble. The battle axe won't be happy. Listen, thank you, Neil. Catch up soon. Love to Christine. Brilliant stuff. Your reaction to what Neil Hamilton had to say, 0344 499 1000. And what are we up to now? What's happening? What are we doing? OK, next up, it's the most important part of the show. It's your calls. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies has created a new term. It's coined an expression which is rural racism, and describing the countryside as, and I quote, overwhelmingly white. So, is the countryside racist? Lee is in Doncaster. Hello, Lee.
Hello there. Thank you for calling me. Thank you.
Well, we're delighted to have you on the show because you spoke earlier to my team, to Faith, and you made some very cogent points. What do you think about this report from the University of Leicester?
I think it's biased, and dare I say it, I think that maybe it's coming from people that are sitting in an echo chamber.
This is a problem in academia, isn't it?
Well, yes. I've never been to university in that way myself to carry out such a study and then publish my findings and claim that they are probably superior to those opinions held by the general population. But in my case, I have worked in Leicester for some 20 years and had a variety of people there because Leicester is an ethnically diverse city. Yes, I know there are some tensions today, but in the workplace, never saw anything like that at all.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, what do you think motivated this report? What's behind it?
I think perhaps maybe it's a backlash because perhaps it could be that the people are feeling threatened. Maybe somebody has an agenda that they wish to peddle and maybe suggested that such an idea would be a great thing to put forward and try and change people's opinions or begin a debate such as we are having now. I'm not sure, but I don't think that it reflects reality.
No, I mean, this report also, Lee, raises concerns that the traditional pub culture and other so-called monocultural customs are exclusionary. I mean, it's hard not to interpret this as an attack on our traditions and on our way of life.
Well, yes, you had somebody on who made the reference to Fawlty Towers and John Cleese when somebody was complaining about the view not being very good. He said, yes, well, that's the English Riviera. What do you expect? Camels or flamingos or something like that. I'm paraphrasing rather. But, if you come to Britain, then Britain has certain geographical features, certain cultural features, and a certain history. Why should you want to say, I don't like your history, I want your history to be more inclusive of people like me who have never been part of your history up until the time that we have decided that we want to hijack it?
Yeah, I mean, it is a question, isn't it? Why has Britain got to be diverse when Ghana doesn't have to be diverse, when China doesn't have to be diverse, and when Japan doesn't have to be diverse?
Well, that is a question that I'm afraid is beyond my level of understanding because I can't give you an answer. I really don't understand why. Somebody somewhere thinks that it must be. There are many people who will say it's some sort of conspiracy against us. I'm not so sure about that. But, you raise a very good point. You go to Japan, and in Japan, they are very, very proud of their culture and want to keep the Japanese culture and way of life. And foreigners, I wouldn't say that they're regarded with suspicion, but if you have something foreign and you want to try and impose it upon the Japanese, I'm not sure that their culture would allow it to happen.
And rightly not. Lee, do give me a call again soon. What a fascinating set of points you had to make. Mark is in Lincolnshire. Mark, is the countryside racist?
No, it isn't, Mark. Yeah, just from your last caller there, Lee, as well, about Japan. I've actually been speaking to somebody in Japan recently. That they're in the early stages of what we've gone through. And they're not happy about it already because, strangely enough, they're importing people from the same kind of areas. And strangely enough, they're having lots and lots of but anyway, aside from that, the countryside racist thing, obviously absolute cobblers. It's just this constant, again, I mean, Lee was saying, there's some conspiracy going on. There is no conspiracy going on. It's called communism. This is what these people are, particularly in the universities. It's all about destroying the country. And you do that by destroying the culture, the history. You do all of that stuff. which is what they're doing. That's what all this was really about. But on a, for me, a net effect level, and I'll be totally honest with you on this call, Mark, on a net effect level, what it actually does, which they either are trying to achieve as well, or they don't realise this will be the net result, but the net result will be you will push people further and further to the right at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because all we're seeing in this country is appeasement, appease this, appease that. Your history's racist, your buildings are racist, your education system's racist, your employment systems are racist. Everything's racist, and it's always aimed at us. It's always beating the white man over the head, the native particularly, over the head with racism, bigots, white supremacists, evil, far-right Nazi, blah, blah, blah. That's all it ever is. And what actually ends up happening, and I feel it in myself, and I'm quite sure, they might not admit it, but I'm quite sure there's plenty of listeners, listening, are probably feeling the exact same thing. You get dragged further and further to the right because they're forcing you to go further and further to the right. You end up with options like Farage, who isn't going to do what's necessary because he isn't going to tackle this problem.
He'll be thwarted, won't he, by the blob?
Sorry?
He'll be thwarted by the blob.
He will be, because he, as I say, he doesn't seem to have the cojones to actually get a grip with what needs actually getting a grip of. I don't have faith in his deportation statement because I don't believe he actually fully believes it in himself, because he's chopped and changed on that policy so many times now. I think the first hurdle he gets to, he'll come up with something like a pause or something like that, and it'll never really take off. Because again, unless you're going to put a bulldozer through essentially the establishment, you're never going to get anywhere. This is the problem that the Tories had with the little they did actually try to do. That was the problem they had because they weren't prepared to do it. I don't think Farage is going to, because the ECHR is only the start of it. If he comes out the ECHR, then what you can imagine already, Mark, what the problems he will have as soon as he tries deporting anybody. The issues he's going to have is you'll have the far left will come out, the media will come out, all the celebrities, everybody will be out, everybody will be gunning for him, and it'll be a Boris Johnson situation again. Can you remember with, the Partygate? It was constant. It's like the kind of thing we should see with the current lot, but obviously the media are quite left-wing, so they don't do it with the current lot. It's very limited with them. Whereas with Johnson, it was very much bang, 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 all the time, over and over and over and over and over again, and in the end, you have to leave. And that's what will happen to Farage. And as I say, because I don't have faith that he has the stones for it anymore, I think he'll either just pause it and just back down, oh no, don't call me racist, because he seems to not like being called racist. So he will, as I say, I have very little faith in him actually doing the job properly. So therefore, people like myself, we end up having to go further to the right. Mm. And essentially, this thing that they always do on the left, like you go to the hotel protests and stuff. What's that thing the left chant all the time? Nazi scum off our street, Nazi scum off our street. Now, there's not a single person in these protests that's a Nazi. There's not a single person in these protests that's far right. But people will get dragged more over there. In other words, I suppose what I'm saying is, the more you keep labelling people something, you will essentially create what you're labelling them. Because they'll end up having to become that in order to sort you out.
Because all people want is change, Mark. What they want is an end to illegal immigration, which is costing billions per year and is a humanitarian, national security and economic disaster. Mark, what a powerful call. Do call me again soon. I'd love to speak for longer, but we must get to the break. But next up, we're going to have a bit of fun because young people in their 20s are putting ice in their lager. I'll speak to a comedian about this that's not happy. That's next.
Sounds like it's complete overreach by the Metropolitan Police and a complete overreaction. It's quite worrying, actually. Disregarding, whether or not I would have been comfortable tweeting what Graham Linehan tweeted or indeed said, put that to one side. We live in a democracy where we value free speech above all else, and he wasn't saying anything illegal. Controversial, yes, but illegal, no. And I think it's incredible that he has been treated in this way.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, publicans have criticised Generation Z, Gen Z drinkers over a new trend that sees them put ice in their beers. New figures show that 28% of pubgoers aged 18 to 35, Generation Z, put ice in their beer during the summer months. The survey of 2,000 people carried out by LG Electronics sought to find out how the summer heat had impacted people's pub drinking habits, and its findings have left pub bosses bemused. Even Sir Tim Martin, the founder of JD Wetherspoon, has said nothing whatsoever is sacred in the modern world. Well, let's get the views of a brilliant comedian and an old friend of mine, James Dowdeswell, who is a brewer, no less, a beer producer. He's the producer of Lazy Eye PA, and he is also the star of an excellent TED Talk entitled The Social Power of Beer and Pubs. James Dowdeswell, welcome to Talk.
Well, hello, Mark. How are you?
Better for seeing you. What a delight to encounter you. I think last time I saw you at a comedy club, you were sipping a beer or two. You're a beer aficionado. Ice in the beer, yes or no?
Well, I'm going to try it live on air. I've never done it before. There is a normal beer.
Okay, and what is the beer you're
Brooklyn
drinking?
lager.
Are you able to tell us what is the lager? What is it?
It is a Brooklyn Pilsner.
Nice.
So that tastes fine. And now I've got in ice cubes here. I've never done this before live on air. There we go. It's going over the ice. Let's just try that.
This has got viral video written all over it. Okay, so James is just sipping the beer now, which has been soaked in ice.
Already, it's a lot colder. And when a beer is colder, it's actually less flavoursome. So when you ice something, you take away the flavour. It's also less pungent and it's weaker.
Oh dear, you're not selling it. Is it acceptable to put ice in cider?
Well, I think that my generation, Generation X, would say yes, but only because we love the film Withnail and I, and Richard E. Grant and Paul McCann famously wanted two gins, two ciders, ice in the cider. I think it is acceptable because not rough cider, but commercially brewed cider, yes, I think that's fine. I think with lager, I find it very strange that when I was a kid in the 90s, we go to nightclubs and we used to complain that the nightclubs were watering down the beer. Now, Gen Z are doing it willingly.
Is there something to do with the makeup of beer that doesn't lend itself to ice? Because I think with cider, it's quite a clean drink, isn't it? It's basically a sort of, it's apple juice, alcoholic apple juice. Is there a problem with the texture of beer that you put ice in it?
To be honest, I think my partner puts ice in her wine, and because she likes it more watery. Ice in a lager, like ice in Carling, I don't think you'd notice a difference. Ice in Budweiser would improve it. In a Brooklyn or a la Budvar, not for me, but I can see why people might do it. Definitely not in car scale. There's a picture of car scale. It looks like a car scale there.
Yeah, it was.
Definitely no ice in that. In fact, the ice cubes would probably jump out of a pint of Timothy Taylor's Landlord. Let me just taste it again.
Yeah, exactly. It's had a while now to sort of sit with the ice and probably get weaker? What do you
I
think?
have to say that's absolutely dreadful. It really does. It's not my thing at all. I've also heard a rumor that Gen Z love a lot of ketamine. I wonder if they're watering it down with vitamin pills and things like that. I think it's extraordinary, to be honest with you. That is a very well brewed beer, and don't mess with it.
That's it. Tell me about the social power of beer and pubs. I really recommend your TED Talk on YouTube. It's inspirational stuff. Why are you so passionate about beer and pubs?
Well, I grew up in a pub, so I was born and brewed in a pub. So my blood type is ABV, which is positive. I wrote a book about pubs. There we go, called The Pub Manifesto. Comedian stands up for pubs, all about saving pubs. And I also brewed my own beer. The imaginary title's Lazy IPA. There we go. Those are my actual eyes. This is an English IPA, 4.8% alcohol, but if you're Gen Z, you can put a bit of ice on it and swiftly make it into 3.2 if you'd prefer.
Listen, you're so good at brewing now, you might have to actually give up the day job of stand-up comedian. But a comedian he absolutely is, James Dowswell, a very funny man, and it turns out a passionate advocate of beer. Thank you to James. We'll catch up again soon. James, thanks for joining us and for drinking on air and demonstrating that ice in lager is deeply reprehensible, completely wrong, and a disgrace. Listen, we've got a very, very busy hour to come. The Royal Peace Summit is on, but Prince William is not happy. We've got Kinsey Schofield on that. But first, just how broke is Britain and could it spark an election? We'll be asking Liam Halligan next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk, the home of common sense. Mark Dolan with you for the next hour. Lovely to have your company in for the legendary Kevin O'Sullivan, who's taking a well-deserved break. But Talk never takes a break, and we've got a busy hour to come. The Royal Peace Summit is on, But as King Charles and Prince Harry reportedly prepare to meet this September, one member of the family is apparently not happy, Prince William, who is said to be furious at the idea of bringing Harry back into the royal fold. I'll get more on this bitter civil war playing out within our monarchy in the company of the Queen. Of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield live from the United States. And we're going to discuss the economy in just a moment with Liam Halligan, Britain's most trusted and respected economist. But can I just get to your comments regarding Graham Linehan, who is the creator and co-writer of Father Ted, one of the funniest shows ever. This guy should be a multi-millionaire. He should be writing sitcoms all day long. There should be a Father Ted the musical. But because this guy thinks that you can't change your sex and that there are just two sexes, a man and a woman, his career is in tatters. And the latest is that he's been arrested by cops at Heathrow Airport for some making provocative remarks about the trans community. It's a growing scandal, and how about this from an unnamed viewer of the show? Mark, can we find out who called the Met and told them that Graham Linehan should be arrested? The Met aren't seeing these posts. They're getting sent the bullets to fire. So who is doing this? Was Graham Linehan even in the UK when he posted those tweets? To my knowledge, he was in America at the time, says James. Ange says, Mark, if Glynn's tweets had said men rather than trans-identified men, not an eye would have been raised. And how about this from Alison? Hi, Mark, as a former cop, I was taught to go for the genitalia if I was in a bad situation. I would do it now if I had to, because, of course, what Graham Linehan said is that if there's a trans woman that's being aggressive, punch them in the balls, is what he said, which I think was obviously provocative, but tongue-in-cheek. Anyway, she'd said, Alison said, I would do this if I had to right now. The Met will use what we called the Ways and Means Act to charge Graham with something. I'm glad Farage is in America so he can tell Trump and Vance about this outrageous act. Well, it's even been criticised by the Prime Minister's office, J.K. Rowling and Piers Morgan, among others. But let's get to the economy now, because as Britain teeters on the verge of bankruptcy, could economic collapse spark a snap general election? And let's get the views of Britain's most trusted and respected economist, the brilliant Liam Halligan, who is the founder of When the Facts Change, which can be found at liamhalligan.substack.com. You can also hear Liam on television and on the radio, regular on, of course, Question Time, and a columnist at The Telegraph. Liam, good evening.
Good to be with you, Mark.
Great to have you on the show and great to see you again. Liam, just how much trouble are we in economically, would you say?
Well, I wouldn't want to be alarmist, Mark, but our borrowing costs are easily the highest in the G7, and they're pointing up. We now have the highest borrowing costs for the government since 1998. The difference is that back in 98, our national debt was 36% of GDP of our entire economy in a year. Now it's approaching 100% of GDP. That's why debt service costs are so high. The government's spending twice as much on debt service, paying the interest on its debt as it's spending on defence. It's spending more on debt service than it's spending on schools. So it's a big problem, and a significant number of very senior economists in recent days, Mark, have been issuing warnings that the UK government is sailing close to the wind when it comes to its borrowing. And financial markets are pushing up borrowing costs more than other G7 countries because investors don't believe in Labour's assurances that they're going to get spending under control, that they're going to hit Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules. So that's where we are. Our credit rating is low. We're paying a lot more to borrow now in this country, the government is, than in Spain, Greece and Italy. Easily the highest of all the major economies, and it's a worry.
It most definitely is. How much of this is a legacy from the last Conservative government?
That's a very good question, a very fair question, Mark, as befits you.
because when Labour took over in July 2024 from the Tories, tax as a share of GDP was already at a 70-year high. The economy was growing faster than other G7 economies, but it was still barely growing. And so Labour took on a difficult fiscal situation, a difficult situation with our public finances. But I'm afraid Rachel Reeves has made it a lot worse, because she's borrowed a lot more money, she's spent a lot more money, she's bunged a lot of pay deals to her mates in the public sector unions. You know, lots of nice things that Labour politicians want, breakfast clubs and all the rest of it, big increase in benefit spending. But financial markets aren't backing it. They're saying, if Labour keeps increasing taxes, you're going to throttle the economy, you're going to throttle growth. You're not going to get the tax revenues that you think you're going to get by raising tax rates. And that's really where we are ahead of this, you know, really crucial budget now in October or November. If Rachel Reeves just, in a sort of ideological way, pulls the tax lever and ups tax rates in many parts of the economy, then growth is going to stall even more. And it's going to worry financial markets, and they're going to push borrowing costs up even more. This is where the rubber hits the road, Mark. This is financial reality. Politicians can spin numbers, but you can't spin the maths. And the maths say that the UK government is paying 5.7% on 30-year borrowing now, Mark. And at the peak of the Liz Truss mini-budget crisis, just for one day, that same borrowing cost touched 4.85%. So we've been way beyond the bounds of that mini budget situation where, you know, the media went completely bananas. Borrowing costs have been above 5% for the government for the whole of this year, and now they're 5.7%. And we simply can't ignore this, because in the end, this will make it impossible for the government to borrow money in an economical way, and that will start to impact, you know, all the payments that governments make, benefits, pensions, and so on. Again, I don't want to cause alarm, but I'm hardly alone. A lot of very serious people are now saying that the British government is borrowing too much and spending too much, and the markets are calling time on that.
And that's before another potential economic shock, like a pandemic or a war or an energy crisis or some other, global event which provokes an economic crash almost overnight. I mean, there's no wiggle room, is there, Liam? What I've got to ask you is, I mean, it strikes me that the only fix for this is a drastic cut in public spending, austerity 2.0, austerity on acid. But that, of course, is politically impossible for this Labour Chancellor.
Look, I think there will be enforced cuts in public spending. I do think that's going to happen, whether they're enforced by some external body or they're just have to happen because of what's happening on financial markets. But look, that may not happen. It may be, there's a very rosy scenario here. It may be that, you get peace between Russia and Ukraine, you get peace in the Middle East, some kind of, cessation of hostilities for a while after, of course, some grinding years of conflict. It may be that the tariff diplomacy situation calms down and Trump's made a lot of deals with a lot of countries. If he makes more deals with more countries, then the global economy could be set to grow. We may be able to grow our way out of this. We may be able to, but that there are serious there's a chance that we may not. I mean, I interviewed on my When the Facts Change Substack last week Professor Jadit Chadha, a Cambridge academic, a very moderate, apolitical, mild-mannered but world-class economist. He's run the National Institute for Economic and Social Research for most of the last decade. That's our premier macroeconomic think tank, kind of big picture economy think tank, like the IFS, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, does tax. The National Institute does the macroeconomy. And Jadit Chadha, having run the National Institute for almost a decade, said on my podcast that an IMF 1976 style International Monetary Fund bailout, is, quotes, very much on the cards. People like that don't say things like that for no reason.
And this
These
time
are people
round,
of massive expertise and experience that are now going over the top, speaking out in a way that could be conceived as alarmist and talking down the country, but feeling imperative that the situation is such that they need to speak out.
Most definitely. And there wouldn't be
where they came from.
Yeah, there wouldn't be a bailout as such, would there? The British economy is too big to technically bail out. I guess the IMF would oversee an emergency budget, which wouldn't come from number 11, but a group of technocrats, global technocrats deciding how much the NHS gets and schools and hospitals.
This isn't beyond the realms of possibility. Again, I don't want to be alarmist, but this is what happened in Italy, a comparable size economy to us in the Eurozone, you know, a decade ago, not much more, to Greece, to Spain, to Ireland. There's no reason why it couldn't happen here. Obviously, I don't want that to happen, but we are only, you know, another bond market spasm. If the 30-year gilt yield goes consistently above 6%, the British government is spending, you know, tens of billions of pounds a month on debt interest payments, right? Yeah. And that's going to be a big problem. So we have to understand, our political and media class has to understand that the state needs to do less and do it better, because we can't continue to live beyond our means. There are endless academic economists who will tell you that we can. You know, if an answer is politically convenient, you'll be able to find an economist that can back up that answer with some scientific hocus pocus, right? But the reality is that in the end, countries where the tax take is, you know, 30-35% of GDP, they grow a lot faster than countries where the tax take is 40-45% of GDP. And we're now, you know, approaching the latter group. And I think if you raise tax rates significantly in this upcoming autumn budget, I do think that you will see that Britain is at the limit of its tax tolerance. We are, to use the jargon, beyond the peak of the Laffer curve. talkTV viewers and listeners will know all about the Laffer curve. It's worth looking up. The idea that you get to a point where increasing tax rates just leads to less tax revenue beyond a certain point, because people just stop doing business and they evade and they avoid and they, you know, bugger off overseas.
Yeah.
So I do think we're at that point. Has Rachel Reeves got the grit, the determination, the imagination to do what needs to be done? We need to be signalling tax cuts. We need to be raising the threshold at which VAT starts from, you know, 80 odd grand to 150 grand. Get those small businesses moving. Get those British entrepreneurs' juices flowing. Instead, we're taxing them into oblivion. Rachel Reeves doesn't understand that in the end, all money comes from private sector business. Everything, that is the fountainhead of economic progress. And she's just taxing it, you know, up the schwing, as they say.
Definitely. Well, listen, I love your Substack, which is just brilliant. I just Google Liam Halligan on Substack for your fantastic columns and journalism and interviews and everything. And then, of course, your column in The Telegraph as well. Do you agree with your stablemate at The Telegraph, Alistair Heath, who is not prone to understatement, let's be honest, who has said just a few days ago, panic in the markets will force Starmer into an early election? Could there be a political dimension to an economic crisis?
Well, I think Alistair Heath is a very shrewd analyst of the economic and political scene. I think we're quite similar in the fact that we both try and get our arms around both politics and economics. And, you know, he's a forceful, incisive writer, but he's also a very thoughtful guy. And I think he's right. I do think we're now in the realms. I wrote a big piece in the Daily Mail this time last week, saying that we could see an early election if there's some kind of bailout type situation and the hard left of the Labour Party, and there are lots of them, a lot more than there were under Blair, if they go for broke and say, we don't want, you know, any kind of fiscal controls, we don't want cuts, we don't want to do what the markets want, can't we just abolish the markets? Who are these people anyway? I mean, just lunacy. I mean, they might prefer to be in opposition. They might just depose Starmer and bring in someone else. There's any number of possible candidates on the backbenches, you know, very rhetorically talented, increasingly noteworthy Labour backbenchers there among the hard left. And so I do think there is a chance that if we do come into some kind of financial spasm, and it doesn't, who knows what the spark will be? It'll be something geopolitical, something overseas. But if that does happen to the UK, and I desperately hope that it doesn't, but if it does, I do think that the implications for the cost of living and so on, of course, won't be good, but the political implications will be immediate, because I think Starmer's support, his majority is broad, but very, very shallow.
A deep privilege to have you on the show. Liam Halligan can be found at Substack, When the Facts Change. Of course, he's a columnist at The Telegraph. He's the co-host of the brilliant Planet Normal podcast with Alison Pearson, and also just broadcasting on television and radio. Liam Halligan, thank you so much. We'll catch up soon. Powerful stuff. Your reaction, 0344 499 1000. Next up, it's the big one, folks. Yes, the Royal Peace Summit is on. But as King Charles and Prince Harry reportedly prepare to meet this September, one member of the family is apparently not happy. Prince William, who is said to be furious at the idea of bringing Harry back into the royal fold. We'll get reaction live from the United States next.
Sounds like it's complete overreach by the Metropolitan Police and a complete overreaction. It's quite worrying, actually. Disregarding, whether or not I would have been comfortable tweeting what Graham Linehan tweeted or indeed said, put that to one side. We live in a democracy where we value free speech above all else, and he wasn't saying anything illegal. Controversial, yes, but illegal, no. And I think it's incredible that he has been treated in this way.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
OK, folks, look, the deal is on. We are hearing that the Royal Summit is going to happen between William and Charles. Let's take a look at the exact implications of this, because I think it's absolutely huge. So, King Charles and Prince Harry are reportedly preparing to meet in the next week or two. Of course, Harry is coming to the UK in September for the Well Child charity. And apparently there's one member of the family not happy about this, Prince William, who is said to be furious at the idea of bringing Harry back into the royal fold. Let's get to the truth of this. Let's get the inside story from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Hello, Kinsey.
I am not on board with this, Mark. I feel like I'm going to rain on your parade when I tell you that I don't think that this royal reunion is actually happening.
Now, tell us why you say that, because a lot of rumours are that because Harry's in the country, Charles is battling cancer, there was the secret summit with representatives from both parties, that a big date is on in a week's time.
I understand. I mean, I was worried that I was the one that instigated this because I said right after the BBC interview, well, Harry's going to the UK for Well Child, so perhaps they could meet then. So I'm worried if I started the domino effect here, but I don't believe that they will. I think that the king will mourn his mother the same way that his mother mourned her father. Around the anniversary of her death with close friends and family. And I don't think that he would risk damaging her memory by having this secret meeting with Prince Harry, because that's all of the headlines would be all about that. And it would dismiss the Queen's legacy, the Queen who gave us so many selfless years. And I think that he wants to take a beat and to take a moment to remember her. And I think he realizes that Harry and Meghan's brand has become incredibly toxic, and he would be negatively affecting what could be a moment for us all to sit back and remember what we're missing in Queen Elizabeth.
Hard to imagine, though, isn't it, that Prince Harry would come to the UK and not see his father, given that Charles is battling cancer. The two men haven't been together since February of last year.
I don't believe so, because remember around the time that Queen Elizabeth died, it was Katie Nicholl that reported that the Queen had asked to see Prince Harry and Meghan. They were headed to the UK for the Well Child Awards, and Meghan received a trophy for something, another participation trophy. I can't remember exactly what it was for, but you'll remember she wore that red top and red pants as she accepted that award. And it was reported at the time around the Queen's death that the Queen had invited them to spend some time with her, to see her while they were there, and they turned that offer down. So I think common sense for you and I would be, I'm absolutely going to make every effort to see my father, who's ill with cancer. But I don't know if Harry and Meghan think that way.
If not now, then when?
When Prince Harry apologizes and they feel like they can trust him. And I don't know if that will ever come to fruition. I mean, Meghan just did an interview with Bloomberg that has over 500,000 hits, where she basically regurgitates how miserable her life in the royal family was because she had to wear pantyhose. I mean, that's not a family that's eager to reconcile. If you're a family that's eager to reconcile, you watch your words. You only speak positively. And when she went into not having a voice. There is real bitterness still there when you watch Meghan Markle talk about her very brief time as a working member of the British royal family. I don't think that this reunion is happening. I think that the king, you're coming from a place, you're coming from your heart, and I really admire that. But I think if King Charles's ultimate objective is to protect the future of the monarchy and to protect William's reign, then he has to continue to distance himself from Prince Harry, who's proven to be very destructive. Some would say, not a very truthful person, historical inaccuracies in his book Spare. Harry has been an incredibly destructive figure over the last 5 years, causing a lot of hurt and pain when the family was already hurting. Over the loss of Prince Philip, Harry then writes in Spare about a private conversation between him and his father and Prince William at Prince William's funeral. During right after the loss of Queen Elizabeth, Harry and Meghan launched multiple attacks between the Netflix series and Harry's book. I don't think that if the royal family wants to stay strong, and if the royal family wants to protect themselves, they'll give Prince Harry an inch.
If King Charles's health were to worsen, would a meeting inevitably happen, do you think?
I don't know if we would know. I don't know if Prince Harry would know. I don't know if we would know, so I don't know if Prince Harry would know, because Prince Harry is getting the same news that we get these days. That's how much they're distanced. They had no idea that Catherine was as ill as she was. They found out with the rest of us. So I don't know if Harry would know if the king's health took a turn. Maybe he would do what he did last time and jump on a plane and go over there. But I think that to protect the king's peace, do you remember the call? There was a reported call between Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles at the time, where the Queen said, "Can you just take his calls? He's calling me saying you won't take his calls." Yeah, I think we've discussed this before. Yeah. And the King, Prince at the time, said, "I'm not an ATM." I mean, it's our understanding that the King feels like Prince Harry always wants something from him. If you watch that BBC interview that happened this year, he's saying that his father could pick up the phone and change everything for him security-wise. He's pointing the blame at his father, saying that the reason that he is so stressed out and the reason that he's fearful for his life is because his father won't step up and fix everything for him. I just don't know if the King has the energy, knowing that at least 3 times a month he's still being treated for cancer. Yeah. And you know how hard that is on your body. I don't know if he has the energy to deal with Harry.
Perhaps not. I fear that the King's health may be worse than is being reported, and that's fine. It's not our business to know the details of the King's health. That is a private matter. It's a family matter. We wish him well, and I hope I'm wrong about that, but I take the view that the King is rather poorly. And therefore, is it conceivable, Kinsey, that these two men, William and Charles, may never meet again?
Oh man, Mark, you're going dark here on me. I don't want to say that Prince Harry and the King will never see each other again. I don't want to say that. Perhaps the palace would arrange, a special moment between the two. But again, Mark, I go to Spare and Prince Harry writing about being in the room with Queen Elizabeth's body and the intimacy of that. We should have never heard about Prince Harry discussing being alone with Queen Elizabeth's body and what was going on there. That's something that's sacred. And Harry monetizes news about his family. He monetizes primarily negative information about his family. And if the family wants to protect themselves and protect the future of the monarchy, Prince Harry continues to be a liability.
Does Charles want a reunion with his son, do you think? Notwithstanding royal protocol and respecting the memory of Queen Elizabeth on the anniversary of her death, deep down, as a father and a man, would he like to see would he like to see Harry again, do you think?
I think he's a softie. I think he wishes none of this would have happened. But I also think he resents Meghan Markle and realizes how much power she has over his son and doesn't like the way that Prince Harry has acted towards his family because of her. So I think that the King misses and loves the old Harry. I'm sure he continues to love his son, but I don't think he recognizes him.
It is a very sort of sorry affair, isn't it? Because if William if Harry and Charles don't meet in a week or two's time, the next possible time that they might meet is Invictus 2027, but that's a long time from now.
It's a long time from now, and I think that again is a long shot. And some commentators have suggested that perhaps, Harry trying to work his way back into the fold is because he realizes that it would look horrible if there were no members of the British royal family there to support him at Invictus. And so, and Invictus has been struggling. They've lost I don't know if you know this, but they've lost quite a few important figures when it comes to management, when it comes to people that work within the Invictus charity, and we don't hear about big blow-ups the way we did with Senabale, or the way we do sometimes when it comes to Archwell's multiple entities. But he has lost some very important people at Invictus. So it would look great if the family were there to support him. I don't know if the family would be there to support him. I agree it would look good. But it almost, if the royal family meets Harry wherever he wants to be met, whether that be a meeting in the next week, or whether it be Invictus 2027, without Prince Harry issuing an apology for the things that were said. He and his wife, despite what he said to Tom Bradby, it's on camera, they accused a member of the British royal family, at least one, of being racist. Omid Scobie, who we know that they've partnered with in the past on the book Finding Freedom, releases Endgame right before we find out about the multiple cancers, accusing King Charles and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, of being racist. Unless Prince Harry acknowledges that his past behavior is unacceptable and apologizes to the family, it gives Harry credibility if the family just shows up to support him. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, as do all of your videos on your incredible channel on YouTube, which is Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. Check it out, Royal Truth Bombs Daily. Kinsey, so great to see you. We'll catch up very soon. My thanks to the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Next up, your calls.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, the Father Ted creator Graham Linehan has revealed he was arrested by 5 armed police officers at Heathrow Airport over a series of allegedly anti-trans tweets. The Irish comedy writer, who was travelling on an American Airlines flight from Arizona to London, says he was treated like a terrorist after being detained as soon as he stepped off the plane. Linehan, whose successful career was derailed by his gender-critical views, claims he was then escorted to a private area where he was informed he was under arrest for 3 tweets. He was held for 16 hours, only released after a nurse said that his pulse was so high and his blood pressure was so high, he risked having a stroke. It looks to be a disproportionate response from the police, very typical of the police these days, seeking to pursue someone for something that's been written on the internet rather than actual crime. Let's get reaction from Chris in Manchester. Hello, Chris.
Yeah, good evening, Mark. The point I wanted to... I'm a retired police officer, by the way.
That's helpful.
The point I would want to make is that nowadays, or since I think it was 1998, when some new legislation was introduced or an addendum to the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, provided a power of arrest for every single offence, even dropping a bit of litter.
Right.
Anybody could be arrested. However, that was dependent upon what's called the necessity rule. And that means that you've got to show that not only an offence has been committed, but that it is necessary to arrest the person for that particular offence. And the necessity criteria includes a number of different areas, the most common of which is in order to effect a prompt and effective investigation of the offence. There are other caveats, such as to prevent loss or harm, or to prevent obstruction of the highway, or to obtain a person's name and address, none of which are applicable in Graham Linehan's case. And my understanding is that these tweets go back as far as April this year. Now, if something was tweeted 5 months ago, I can hardly see that the matter was that it's been a prompt and effective investigation of the matter.
Yeah.
Why on earth they haven't contacted Mr. Linehan and arranged for him what they should have done? Whether or not we consider what he said amounted to an offence is irrelevant, really. If they wanted to interview him, which they are perfectly entitled to do, if they feel an offence has been committed, they could have invited him in for an interview. He didn't have to be arrested, and the matter could be dealt with accordingly. What I suspect has happened is that this has been recorded some time ago. Perhaps very few efforts have been made to try and trace Mr. Linehan or try and arrange for him to be interviewed voluntarily under caution. And then they've simply just put you can put something on a person's passport. It's called ICS, which is a method of placing a note on a person's passport so that when they come through immigration, it flashes up and they can be detained. And I suspect that's what's happened on this occasion. And perhaps the officers might not have been fully aware of what the offence was. So I suspect that it's going to turn out that if Mr. Linehan wishes to pursue the matter, I suspect it's going to amount to an unlawful arrest for which he will no doubt be suitably compensated.
Most definitely. Does this sort of activity bring the police into disrepute, do you think, given the fact that my viewers and listeners are affected on a daily basis by real, actual crime, not things written on the internet?
Completely, yeah. When I was serving, anything along these lines would be dealt with by, at the most, informal advice. Certainly wouldn't have led to an arrest, simply because, having said that, I've been retired for 12 years and I know that times have changed, but certainly when you see what we all regard as real crime, burglary, shoplifting, fraud, etc., effectively being non-policed anymore, and yet the police seem perfectly happy to pursue matters such as these, which I suspect it's all part and parcel of a new breed of higher echelons of police. I certainly don't blame the officers on the ground. They would have been acting under instruction.
Yeah.
I certainly put no blame or emphasis on them at all. This will have come from above. And sadly, the senior leaders in the police now are probably police officers who've perhaps never made an arrest. The term "never seen a man in anger" is the one I use.
Yeah.
Very sort of politically aware, left wing, woke. Yeah. No experience. No military people. I mean, when I joined the police 40 odd years ago, all my governors were ex-national servicemen and armed service personnel,
yeah,
with the inherent attributes of discipline embedded into them, and that was embedded into the officers who served under them. Sadly, that's no longer the case.
It would appear not. I mean, perhaps I could, for those that are just joining us, read out the offending posts on X, if I can. Chris, we've got, if a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he's committing a violent, abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls. Now, it's provocative, it's feisty, but you could argue it's tongue-in-cheek, it's satirical, but it doesn't sound like he's broken the law, does it?
I don't think that constitutes an offence, personally. At the end of the day, it's not an offence to offend somebody. You can offend somebody. It is how you do it. But I suspect a fairly overarching, long-winded explanation that he's given. It's not specific at all. It's a very non-specific remark, the like of which I suspect that if you go onto Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or one of the many social media platforms, you will see pretty much repeated pretty much every day and worse. I mean, I'm aware that comparisons were made to the tweet or the message that Joe Brand released about Nigel Farage. I think actually it was actually unfairly compared with earlier today. I think somebody mentioned that she had suggested that somebody should throw battery acid in his face. She didn't actually say that. She said, instead of a milkshake, why didn't you consider using battery acid, which was a slightly different context. So I thought that was slightly unfair.
And she was on a show where the comedians were invited to be deliberately provocative.
Yes. At the end of the day, it's comedy, it's satire. And it's something that should be, in a free society, we should be allowed to express whatever we want to say. I personally think that it shouldn't be an offence to say anything. That's my own personal view. Now, I know not everybody will disagree. Not everybody will agree with that point of view. But if a person says something that is so beyond the pale, I think particularly if it's someone in the public eye, the sort of public reaction would be sufficient. Effectively, they would be cancelled. Had Mr. Linehan said something much more obtuse in relation, made a racist comment or a very highly offensive comment about a very highly transphobic comment, certainly much more offensive than the one he's actually said, then the very nature of that comment and the very fact that he's in the public eye and the result, the revulsion and the result of him saying something like that would be sufficient. It wouldn't need the police to get involved. Effectively, he'd very, very soon find that contracts were cancelled and that he was no longer wanted for his writing and things like that. That's a far more serious punishment than anything that the police can do.
Chris, a former police officer, thank you so much for joining us during what looks to be a golden era of policing compared to what we have now, where hurty words on the internet are policed more aggressively than shoplifters, muggers, machete-wielding thugs, gangsters, drug dealers and all the rest of it. Chris in Manchester there, what a brilliant call. We do really get the best calls here on Talk and more of those to come. Next up, is the English countryside racist?
What about the right to free speech, Natalie Bennett? Do you respect that right?
I respect the right to free speech, but that obviously has always had limits. The obvious, don't yell fire in a crowded theatre.
What about saying if someone should be punched in the balls? Is that something we should arrest people for?
I think that's inducement to assault. I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't sound like an appropriate...
So if it's inducement to assault...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Crispy says, hi Mark, do you think that Keith Stalin, as in Keir Starmer's phase 2, is to screw the country up even more? They do say it if you listen. And Modi the Bandit Man responding to the idea of 20-year-olds putting ice in lager. Modi says, we love a normal beer, no ice. Mark, Generation Z, ice in their beers, such idiocy. Could be an absolute boon for struggling landlords. No more spending a small fortune every year on Mad Ed's energy policies. Turn them fridges off, disconnect cellar cooling systems. It's genius. Thanks, Gen Z. Martin in Whitley Bay. Glyn in Catterick. Good evening, Mark. Ice in lager, it's got to be the soft southern drinker types that it's passed it down to Generation X. Absolutely deplorable. How about this from Martin? Mark, your caller, claims that Farage doesn't have the cojones to challenge the establishment if he becomes Prime Minister. That is the understatement of the century. Much like a very proud Jeremy Kyle, Nigel only has... Oh, it's a reference to anatomy there, which we won't even go there. More research, please, says Martin on that subject. OK, look, we'll get to more of those texts, but first, shall we take a WhatsApp voice note from Pete? Is the countryside racist?
I have a gluten problem. I have to take my stuff with me when I go to the countryside. I don't moan about it because not everyone's going to cater for my particular soul wishes. If these people don't like it, just don't go there. If they don't like it in Britain, don't stay here. There's nobody stopping anybody from leaving on a plane. Plenty of planes flying out every day.
Georgina is in London. Georgina, do you agree with Pete? If you don't like it, you can lump it.
Well, I'm going to let you know exactly what I think, Mark. I'm sick to the stomach with everything that is British being vilified and eradicated. We are a proud nation, Mark, and we have every right to celebrate our culture, our heritage, our flag, our Britishness and our countryside. We have welcomed other cultures under our flag, and now it's got to the point that people we have welcomed are now dictating how we live, how we should eat, how we should dress, and what flag we should fly. We do not need education in our own culture. Britishness is something that every Indigenous Briton has from birth, and we are fiercely proud and protective of this. However, we do need for people who have too much time on their hands at the University of Leicester to stop making these ridiculous demands on us. And it's the taxpayer who's paying for this stupidity. Leave our country as the country that the migrants were welcomed into. We do not require it to be changed to the country from whence they came. If this is not to their satisfaction and they feel uncomfortable with our country as it is, then they are welcome to go home. We are not going to change everything that makes Britain British to accommodate people who have been given the luxury, and it is a luxury, Mark, being allowed to settle here. It's tantamount to be giving a roof over your head if you are homeless and then having the audacity to complain about the decor and food. We started out as benevolence from the British to other cultures, and it now looked as if something that is now obligatory. And these governing bodies are applying more and more caveats that are eradicating our very essence and everything that is British. And they are using the excuse of inclusion in with which to do it.
Georgina, I can hear the anger in your voice.
I'm absolutely furious. I'm sick and I'm tired of everything that Britain stands for being vilified, being hated. I'm sick of it, Mark. It's absolutely grinding
Apparently
my
the
gears.
countryside needs more halal and kosher butchers, and it needs more spaces for prayer. Is that your experience of the countryside?
The English, I was brought up in the English countryside, and it is beautiful the way it is. Prayer is something that is private. You go to a place where you pray. The Muslims go to mosques, the Christians go to church. But I'm an older lady, Mark, and I'm telling you now, I've been all over the world, and I have learned that Islam is a child that doesn't integrate, nor does it play well with others. And it's a problem with every single culture in this world. It's a problem. And we seem to be bending over backwards for inclusion. What about the British people, Mark? What about us? We matter too. I don't know how many times I've got to say this until somebody actually listens. It's okay sitting in Westminster making these stupid and ridiculous policies, but this is not doing any good for the people of Britain. And we have got to start putting our own people first. It's got to be done. And maybe the Liberals don't like this, and the Dolly do-gooders will be pulling their hair out as what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is correct. It is the working and middle-class taxpayers that are paying for all the bills in this country. They're spending money, this government, like it's going out of fashion. They've got to have forethought. They've got to think where this is going. And the only place this is going is for us to be going bowling hand to the IMF for a handout. We are not Oliver Twist, and this has got to stop.
I mean, one of the most powerful calls that I've taken in all my years of broadcasting. Georgina, you spoke with passion, you spoke from the heart, incredibly articulate, fueled with rage and fueled with a love of a country that you feel that we're losing. Thank you so much for your call, Georgina, and your courage in sharing your views on the home of common sense talk. And let's get a last word from Steve in Ipswich. Steve, I don't know how you follow that.
I don't think I can, but I'll give it a good go. Watch this. I got the news tonight. Someone sent me the contact across that the Daily Mail was reporting that Starmer is now requiring or looking to require us to have digital ID in order that he can control the migration issue. And I put that up on my social media, and I've been rocking around town, not necessarily banging my head against the walls, but having a chat with a few people. Two PCSOs. When I spoke to them, what are you going to do if this happens? Both of them said, we'll look to our conscience, and if we don't think we want to actually enforce these laws, we'll resign. I spoke to some cabbies, always a good arbiter of feelings. One was former services and a female cabbie as well. Both of them absolutely not taking it. Absolutely not taking it. I will not comply. And if Mr. Starmer, he really does need to understand. Mess with the British. We are quiet people. We're good people. We follow the rules in general terms. Quiet people that carry a big bloody stick. And if he wants to keep pushing down this road, he needs to understand. We have a British army, which is 70,000+ strong. That's it. 20,000 infantry. At best, he's got 130,000 in all British Army Forces, Navy and Air Force. He's got a police service, which is maybe 150,000 strong. Don't get this wrong, Mr. Starmer. Do not get this wrong, because you are thousands, tens of thousands. We are millions. And if you get this wrong, I don't even want to think about what could happen. It will be a disaster. And it would be on him. The power that the government would have if they've got digital IDs on us, we go down the path of a digital currency the surveillance level.
And it would be
is now-
sold. It would be sold to us, wouldn't it, Steve, as convenience and security?
That's exactly the point. That is exactly the point. One of the guys that I've known for years came back to me on social media and he said, "We've been wondering for years why the different parties have allowed this migration issue to happen.
Yeah.
They wanted a problem that they could solve with this, the cure they want to deliver. And we can't prove this because we're not on the inside. But those dots are starting to form a pattern. It makes damn good sense to me that, yes, what a great way. You create the problem, you present the cure. Here it is, lovely ladies and gentlemen. They're just digital ID. Everything will be fine. We'll sort everything out. I don't trust these people as far as I could throw them.
I agree with you, and we had it with masking during the pandemic, where it would be a good idea, and it's the polite thing to do, and then it was obligatory. Same with the vaccines, of course, the mandates, so illiberal. A dry run for what could be state tyranny. Steve, will you stay in touch with me? Because I want to hear your thoughts as we continue to debate the idea of ID cards in this country in the weeks and months ahead. I'm delighted to say that in the minutes ahead is Petri Hoskin, who is Britain's foremost late-night broadcaster. Hello, Petri.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I'm the only woman that does it anyway.